Hi everyone, David and Gino here, taking a look at the future race at Monmouth Park on Saturday. Race 8 is the Grade 3 Philip H. Iselin, this one going a mile and a 16th on the main track for older runners. And Gino, not the biggest field in the world, only 6 signed on, but got some familiar names in here, horses who are dropping out of tougher company, and the strength of this race really concentrated towards the outside of the starting gate.
Yeah, I think those three all seem to have kind of the tactical advantage on the group, maybe the recent class advantage on the group. It'll be interesting to see how the pace shapes out with those outside three.
Yeah, let's take a look at that Timeform US pace projector for this Islin. And there's no real confirmed front runner in the race. The number 6, Subador, has gone to the lead before, but doing so going the longer mile and a quarter distance. Morocco is a horse who has been forwardly placed in a few starts, but he's generally more of a stalking type. Maybe Ever So Mischievous gets more aggressive as he stretches out the 2 turns for the first time, but not exactly clear who is going to play out as the pace setter in this race.
I'm hoping it is ever so mischievous with the way that I'm playing this race and maybe their intent with a very good speed rider aboard, someone who gets aggressive with Florent Giroux. This is going to be a horse making the third start of the form cycle and just stretching out farther than they've ever been. That's a horse that's never been more than the mile. So maybe coming out of some quicker races with internal fractions, they just could end up on the lead in here with maybe Il Miracolo and Subsanador sitting just off.
Let's go through this field in post position order, beginning with the number 1, Keras, a local Monmouth horse going out for Terry Pompey. This horse was a sprinter for much of its career, but has stretched out recently and has done pretty well translating that form to some longer trips and actually improving over the last couple of starts. Was game to earn that victory in an optional claim or 2 back at Monmouth, going the mile and 70 yards. And last time, I didn't think he was disgraced by any means, facing off against Tapit Trice, who's just a better horse than these. He was really trying at the top of the stretch, just got turned away late. A 16th of a mile less is probably not going to bother this horse at all.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at the way this race shapes up, he may be one of the more honest closers in here, especially if there's something in this small field where the 3 horses to the outside are all kind of jockeying for position. Maybe they're going a little aggressive at each other. He could be one horse that really does just sit back, get a nice trip, and maybe could pass some horses late, as you pointed out. I think he's coming off of back-to-back career best effort. Those were the 2 best efforts in his career. He had a really good one 2 starts back, and then he showed us that it was no fluke. As you mentioned, I think he had a little bit of trouble in that race too, some traffic, and he moved into it early. I don't mind him at all for the bottom of exotics here.
A horse that is going to need some pace to develop is the number 2, Instant Coffee. This horse generated some headlines on the Derby Trail back in early 2023 when he looked like one of the top early Derby prospects for trainer Brad Cox. Things didn't work out in the Louisiana Derby. He disappointed as the favorite that day and just hasn't been able to get back on track since then. And he's kind of been cycling through different barns since then. The owners, Gold Square, have kind of tried out every trainer that they use, now going to the Chad Summers barn. And he's been in some of the top barns in the game over his past 3 starts. So I'm not sure that the trainer switch is what is going to wake him up in here. And there's just not a whole lot of pace for a horse who doesn't have any early speed anymore.
Yeah, he's just such a tough read in this spot too, because when you go through his body of work race by race, you can make a couple legitimate excuses maybe for some of his recent races. You go through his first 5 starts, he was a multiple graded stakes winner. He was favored in the Louisiana Derby, and at that point, he was probably top 5 in the class as far as that 3-year-old division. And then he was off for 8 months. He shows, or 11 months, shows back up in February after almost a year. We could give him that race. He was 3rd that day, but it's just the gaps and then the running style. Like, even at his absolute best, he would have a tough time in a small field like this at Monmouth, just with the fact that he doesn't have any tactical speed at all. So I think he may just be up against it because of that and a lot of the question marks. And on top of that, David, I think because we know his name, he'll probably be a little bit undervalued when he shows up here on Saturday.
Yeah, he's 4-1 on the line. I would need about 4 times that price to back him in this race.
Great.
The number 3, Antigravity, might be 4 times that price. He's the biggest price on the line, and I think deservedly so. He's coming out of some claiming races. He was in for the $40,000 tag last time, was claimed for just $16,000 by these connections. Starts back, and he's run some of his best races since the claim by Dan Ward. This is just a big step up in class for a horse that was no match for Keras 2 back, and that's not exactly a top contender in this race.
Yeah, all 5 of the wins have come at Monmouth, so that's a positive, but you pointed out the key. Keras is still one of the longer shots in here and beat this horse by 11. Anti-gravity, if I want to defy gravity, I'll watch Wicked later on this year when that one comes out, David.
The number three is or four rather is Ever So Mischievous. He is 3-1 on the line. This horse is looking to get back on track for Brad Cox. He looked like a horse that was so full of promise early in his career, and he delivered, earning that Grade 2 victory in the 49er towards the end of last season. Things didn't work out in the Cigar Mile, and he's just been a little disappointing since coming back for his 4-year-old season. Had to work harder than I was expecting to beat an overmatched optional claiming Group 2 back. Last time was no match for the up-and-coming Mulligan in the John Mayru, but Gino, I still wanted to see him do a little more running in that race.
I agree. I mean, I don't really have very many excuses for him this year not taking that forward. What I'm hoping is someone who's going to be backing him in this spot is just that they're going to get really aggressive. And they're just going to say, hey, let's just try to get to the front end in here. Let's just try to get clear. And maybe that's where we can take another step forward, making our third start of the form cycle, because I just wanted more from him. Like you said, in that last start, he doesn't win the race against a horse like Mulligan, who's very nice. Okay, fine. But we just didn't get much more fight. So I'm hoping different tactics, get really aggressive, first start beyond 1 mile. So let's just see if we can get him out on the engine on the front end. Because I think the two horses to his outside that we're going to talk about next with Il Miracolo and Subador, I just don't know if they're naturally as fast as him. And if they have to try to keep up with Ever So Mischievous, they may be working a little bit harder early on than they would like.
The number 5 is Il Miracolo. He is a horse who was a Grade 3 winner too back in the Ghost Sapper. We'll take a look at the stretch drive of that race. And Gino, you've got to really dig in if you're going to beat Tumba Rumba to the wire when you're in a duel with that horse, because that is one of the gamest horses in racing. And Il Miracolo was able to outduel him to the fifth here, battling back on the inside after getting passed by that foe at the top of the stretch of this race. He's been thereabouts the top of the handicap division for the past couple of seasons. Not really Grade 1 level, but he's been competitive in plenty of Grade 2 and Grade 3 races, as we saw last time in the Ali Sheba, where he was no match for a good horse like First Mission, but stayed on pretty well. The Just Miss finishing as part of the exacta that day. Getting some class relief here. He's got that dangerous tactical speed. He's obviously a contender, though they could never bet enough money on Paco Lopez at Monmouth, so I wonder what kind of price he's going to be.
Yeah, he's a really cool horse too. I mean, if you can eliminate some of the races last year and maybe in the 2-year-old season where he was just facing a little better 3-year-olds or better 2-year-olds at that point. I mean, isolate his last 8 races, they're all in graded stakes. He has 2 wins, a second and 4 thirds. Just always shows up really honest, a mark of consistency. He can pass some horses too, but if you do really look at his victories, he does sort of have that fall right into it style when he wins. He really does have to kind of be right there, kind of battling it out. As you pointed out, he's a tough horse to beat to the wire. He'll grind it and grind it and grind it and keep fighting you. But I'm not sure if he's going to get that fall right into it trip in here that he needs. I think he's the measuring stick. He's the horse to beat in here. Not sure if he's the horse to bet. We'll see, like you pointed out, what kind of price they're going to get on Paco.
The number 6 is Subador. He just missed earning a Grade 1 victory in the Santa Anita Handicap 2 starts back. We'll take a look at that heartbreaking defeat to Newgate. He led every step of the way, did Subador, and just got gunned down in the final strides of this race. So maybe the mile and the 16th of this Philip Iselin is going to work a little bit better for Subador, because it does kind of feel like he was really stretched to his limit going the mile and a quarter, both here and in his subsequent start when he faded to finish 4th in the Gold Cup at Santa Anita a couple of months later. Gino, I don't know what you thought about the early stages of that Gold Cup, but there was an awkward about a furlong into the race where he was coming over on Reincarnate, and Flavien Prat, who is not the kind of jockey to cut others off, I think almost didn't realize that Reincarnate was down in there and had to snatch up Subador, and I think it broke his momentum and maybe made the trip a little bit more uncomfortable than it otherwise would have been. He's now coming off another freshening, but interesting that Richard Mandela is shipping across the country, something he doesn't do that often.
I mean, you come all the way across too, when very easily could have stayed for a race like the Pacific Classic in just a couple of weeks, and they wanted to come here. So it obviously feels like very, very live in this spot. And my question with him is just, is this really a horse that wants to sit off and pass horses? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure, because I do think that coming into the San Antonio, he was favored. That was just a really weird race. There was not any real proven horse in that field. And so I think the bettors were just looking for a new face to grab onto. He was overbet that day. It's not as if he ran poorly, and there was a lot of buzz about him going into the race, but in like reading what Sadler had said leading into it, he felt like this horse was behind. So he just kind of seemed like he may have been a bit of a bad bet at that point. And he really felt like the big cap was the spot for him. I think you pointed out perfectly what some of my notes said too. He just couldn't cross over. He couldn't get over. And I think that hurt his chances here. Like, he fits very well in this spot. I'm just a little concerned or curious with Trip. If he can show that he has no problem sitting third and sitting to the outside and passing horses, then that will kind of elevate him into this division as a horse that has some versatility. I'm just not sure if he maybe needs that cruising Trip going a little bit longer. So I'll have him more underneath, but definitely not a horse who I'd completely dismiss.
Let's throw up our picks for this Iselin, and I did put that aforementioned number 6 Subsonador on top. I'm also concerned that he might be a horse who needs the front end, but we've seen Mike Smith just get aggressive with these horses, send them right to the lead before, so we'll see how other jockeys might react to those tactics if they are what they decide to do. And I think the outside post is also going to help a horse like this. He doesn't have to deal with kickback. He's just going to be able to stay in the clear every step of the way. So I've got him over the number 5, Il Morocco, who I respect. I just feel like he's going to be a short price in this race. I'm against the horse that you put on top, Ever So Mischievous. I've just never been the biggest fan of him, but I'll let you make the pitch for him.
Yeah, we have a similar looks at this race. I just kind of go a little colder on Subsanador. You're a little colder on Ever So Mischievous, who I'm hoping just gets out in front of two that I think are a little slower than him early on to the outside. So if he can get out front and make those two work a little bit harder, looks like both of us think that maybe if you want to find some value in here, it could be getting Cozieres into the mix somehow, because if those three to the outside are pushing each other, Cozieres could definitely at least get by one or two of them late, pick up some pieces and spice up some of the exotics.
It's the number 6 Subsanador for me, the number 4 Ever So Mischievous for Gino in Saturday's feature at Monmouth, the Grade 3 Iselin. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.